I mean, a long list. And they were going to basically throw him in prison and throw away the key. Bob was smart enough to get an attorney. And this is the information that Bob shared with me until after I was able to, I mean, this is all coming from the insider. There was an email chain going back and forth between the Department of the Interior and Bob Garrett's attorney. Bob Garrett's attorney was saying, you can't put Bob in prison because of the Good Samaritan Act of like 1970 something, and he was trying to render aid and they were saying, well, we don't care. And his attorney, the turning point in the conversation, his attorney responded back to whoever this was at this federal level and said, if you try to put this guy in prison, I promise you I will turn this into a circus. I will make this into a public circus, and the truth will come out. Then they backed off. Coincidentally, Bob Garrett's YouTube channel went down and all this other stuff, but they backed off. There was no more investigation of them.
Why does it seem, Wes, though, that everybody who has some of these encounters, including many of people who've called into your Sasquatch Chronicles show, that they aren't very good? I mean, I've never heard of a friendly Bigfoot story yet. Have you?
Well, I think the thing with Sasquatch, to be honest with you, George, is you're dealing with a wild animal. I'm sure you've heard the telepathy stories. I'm sure you've heard the cloaking.
Yes.
And all of that's nonsense, as far as I'm concerned. You're dealing with a wild animal, and a lot of the encounters, and I've talked to many police officers, I've talked to many hunters, I've talked to many, you'll find that these encounters really aren't happy encounters. There is situations to where you'll even have a lot of what I call flute players or hippies that like to feed these things, and then all of a sudden they stop feeding them, and these things seem to turn on them. You're dealing with a wild animal, and so I don't think you're ever really going to have a happy encounter when you're dealing. And don't get me wrong, this isn't a dumb animal by any means. It's a very intelligent animal, but it's still a wild animal in the same breath. And that's why you don't see a lot of happy encounters. That's why you don't have people coming forward and saying, hey, I went out and held hands with this thing. The real encounters, when you get down to the brass tacks of the real encounters, like with hunters, and I could go on and on with stories if you want to stories all night, but the same thing you'll have with all these stories is, at the end of the day, you're dealing with a wild animal. And at the end of the day, a very elusive wild animal, and it's never going to turn out good when you're dealing with a wild animal.
No, it's not. And you see a lot of people, though, as you mentioned, think of this creature as extraterrestrial, dimensional, something like that, giving it some kind of personality and emotion. And I don't think it has any of that.
Yeah, I think that, like with the UFO thing, I was talking to a gentleman the other day who's a paranormal investigator, and I think actually has legitimate Sasquatch activity on this property. And he also talks about UFO activity on this property, which there's no reason for me to not believe this guy, because there is actually UFO activity going on this property. And then he starts mixing the two. Well, Sasquatch must be an alien because I'm seeing this and this, therefore 2 plus 2 equals 5. Instead of saying, well, maybe there's something going on here with Sasquatch, and then maybe there's a legitimate UFO. I think people try too hard to paint the picture on separate phenomena going on. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Let's take a few calls here for you, then we'll wrap things up after the break with final phone calls. We go to John in Oklahoma City, first-time caller.